Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning study, the last morning study of the week. And we're going to continue looking at Ezra chapter 6 and some loose threads that we have to look at regarding Samuel Snow's letters. But before we do that, let's have a word of prayer. The dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the time that we have again this morning to open your word. And we invite your spirit to speak to our hearts, to bring conviction and power to our lives. And we ask that we can understand the things that we study. They can change us and that they can be shared with others. We know, Lord, that there's many things that Seventh-day Adventists we have not seen in the past. We just pray, Lord, that these truths that have unfolded, that you can give us wisdom on how to share these with others. Be with those who are watching online. May your Holy Spirit be with them as well. And may you guide and direct in this study is our prayer in Jesus' name. Okay, so, we've been looking at the three decrees. We're studying the book of Ezra. And I was saying before we started recording, this is one of my favorite topics, just because I've spent so much time with it. But not even just that. There is something about understanding when we study the Bible. We come to understand the people. Like it becomes, a part of, like, you can see somebody could read through the book of Ezra and not really get much out of it. Lots of the details are going to pass by. But the real details that I find that impress me the most are understanding and getting to know the people. Now, of course, one of the problems I have is names. And so one of the problems I've always had reading the Bible is like remembering who's who, what name belongs to what story goes where. So maybe that just for me is something that, it's helped me in the way that we study as I get a much better sense of the story here. Now, the other thing about this story here in Ezra, of course, is the connection that we have to Millerite history. So when you can make this connection, when we can take Ezekiel and we can connect it with Millerite history, we start to understand a depth of the story that no one else could understand. That is, they're not going to see the connection. Now, I was mentioning Samuel Snow's books, and we started looking at them, particularly just in the context of the 6,000 years. So that was one of the things that we were discussing, the prophetic periods of Miller. Miller has this 6,000 years that goes from 4157 BC to 1843, and Samuel Snow is going to use that. And then, so dealing with the decree of Artaxerxes, which we're going to eventually get to, I don't know how much we'll get done of it today, but we'll at least look at it. Artaxerxes' decree in 457 has all of this connection, Ezra 7:9 and so forth, which we connect with Millerite history. Now, of course, Adventists tend to think that the decree was given in the fall of 457, where it had to have been given previous to that. And we did look a bit at how Samuel Snow doesn't quite get that history correct. So part of the problem in his initial writing, I believe he was using, what's the guy's name, Prideaux or something like that, his chronology, and he has a 0 year, something to that effect, if I got the name correct and the facts. But anyway, he ends up getting the years wrong because he's seeing 457, what he calls 457 actually would be what we call 458. And so he doesn't know that. So there's a number of problems, obviously, that occur with Snow's arguments. The other one that we particularly want to look at isn't just the problems with 457, but also with the baptism of Christ. So he's going to have Christ he's going to have the 70th week, that final week is going to begin with John the Baptist's ministry. Let's see, how does he do that? I'm trying to remember. I'm going to have to read it again. But yeah, so it's not really clear. He doesn't look at the baptism. I think he has the baptism being later, not in the fall of 457 or 27 AD. Kept doing that yesterday too. So those are the things that I'm sort of going to cover. We'll see how well we cover them. So one of the first things I just want to look at dealing with Samuel Snow's letters has to do with the date of the dedication of the sanctuary, which we see here in the house was finished on the third day of the month Adar, which is in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. Now that date, the third day of the 12th month, has this characteristic that in that year, in 515 BC, it's the 12th day of the third month on our calendar, so it's inverted. And I had noticed this before I'd actually noticed it with Samuel Snow's letters, and before I'd really started using symbolic dates. It was just like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I think it was in 2014 I actually noticed this. But it didn't really become significant until we did Samuel Snow's letters in 2017, that we noticed that Samuel Snow's first letter, and we're going to go here. So I know this chart, this diagram is like super busy, and so lots of things on it. It's not, but what it does give us is it gives us Samuel Snow's letters. That is the first four. The one is just his remarks on New Year's Eve in 1843, but the ones that are all of his published letters are listed here prior to 1844. And then we're going to see that his first letter, written to Brother Southard, and that's published in the Midnight Cry. So it's written on February 16th. It's published in the Midnight Cry February 22nd. And then it's republished in Heim's Signs of the Times, April 3rd, 1844. So that Midnight Cry publication, February 22nd, happens to be the third day of the 12th month. So up here, if you can see that, you can see there, third day, 12th month, February 22nd. That's when it's published. It's written February 16th. We're going to look at that letter. And we're also going to look at the August 22nd, the True Midnight Cry publication, which is an expansion and a correction of that initial letter. And part of this came from the discussion just dealing with Uriah Smith and Ellen White's different endorsements. So, we know that Samuel Snow, Ellen White never mentions Samuel Snow by name, but talks about the Midnight Cry being given midway, which is going to be the Boston meeting. So she endorses to some degree the message, right? So the Midnight Cry is endorsed as a message. And so people argue the chronology then that Samuel Snow uses must be correct, so that the creation of the world had to have happened in 4157 BC. But yet there are other things in his paper, in his article, his letter, and in the article, The True Midnight Cry, that definitely contradict what Ellen White plainly teaches. So you can't have Ellen White's endorsement, so to speak, contradicting what she plainly teaches. And this mistake is made in other areas as well. So how she refers to, what's it called? The Daystar article by Crozier. So they just say, oh, it's a blanket endorsement. Everything he says must be correct. Or her endorsement of Thoughts on Daniel and Thoughts on the Revelation of Uriah Smith, that somehow that doesn't just endorse those books, it endorses almost Uriah Smith as a prophet. So those are things that we've been discussing, and they're sort of leading us here to examine Samuel Snow's letters, but also we can see that they're connected to the decrees in these various ways. So the dedication of the Second Temple being on the third day of the 12th month on the biblical calendar, being March 12th. In 1844, the third day of the 12th month is February 22nd. So when I had noticed this, that there was a connection between uh, the biblical date and a date in the Bible, that really opened up Samuel Snow's letters. So we're going to go through them, even though this is a busy diagram. We'll just take them one at a time. So we got the 26th day of the 11th month. That in and of itself doesn't mark any other date that I know of, the February 16th writing of the letter. But February 16th being the second month, 16th day, we know that we can count 2 months and 16 days from February 16th, and we come to Samuel Snow's second letter. So the May 2nd letter is the one where he's writing about the chiasm in the week of Christ and dealing with the Passover. That date happens to be the Passover, the 14th day of the first month. And his first letter had been republished in Prime Signs of the Times on April 3rd, which happens to be the date that the Karaite Jews and the Rabbinic Jews observed the Passover in 1844. So you got these two different Passover dates, the republication of his first letter on a Passover, the false one, and then his second letter published on the actual correct Passover. So these became pretty unlikely things. And then, of course, the May 2nd letter is the center of a chiasm, because his last letter, which is published July 18th, is 2 months and 16 days after May 2nd. So that February 16th date becomes the symbol of 2 months and 16 days. And then he has his June 22nd letter, which is Pentecost, the 6th day of the third month. And that's going to tie to 457 BC, because in 457 BC, that's the center of the chiasm where Ezra leaves Babylon and goes to Jerusalem. And so it's from the 12th day of the first month, a date that Miller used in 33 AD for the crucifixion of Christ, which again makes no sense, but that's what he had. That 12th day of the first month becomes a symbol as well. And so in 457, they're going to leave the river Ahava on the 12th day of the first month. They arrive at Jerusalem on the first day of the fifth month. The center date is Pentecost, the 6th day of the third month. So the fact that Samuel Snow has this Pentecost letter in 1844, so you can kind of see here, there's the Pentecost letter. You can see below here, I have June 29th, that says Pentecost, right? Also, there is a chiasm in 457 between the 12th day of the first month, right? If that is the center. But that Pentecost is the center of 107 days, 54 inclusive days and 54 cardinal days, makes 107 days. And that 107 days symbolizes the 10th day of the seventh month. And of course, the 10th day of the seventh month also is the center of a chiasm over here from first day of the fifth month with the 3 days here, that 3 days there, making this chiasm, and 3 days, 3 here, this chiasm. So you get the 10th day of the seventh month and that's going to be in the center of this period where Ezra is setting up the judicial system, legal system, and the government in Jerusalem. And it's going to be finally implemented. The 3 days call to repentance is actually has penalties that are listed in Artaxerxes' decree. So there's a lot of detail here about these different letters. Of course, we know the July 18th published letter confirming the covenant, but there is also another letter that we generally don't address, and that's just because it's not connected to, that's the May 1st letter. It's not connected to his prediction in regard to, 1844 or anything. It's where he talks about the mocking that went on. I don't know why I have that one bolded, this one not. I'm not sure what I did there. I'm just going to change my bolding and why it's not bolded. Anyway, maybe I should have had this one not. if I was going to have any of these, not bolded, because that's not one of the letters that we have in that structure of Samuel Snow's letters. It's not part of the structure. Okay. And then he has Prophetic Chronology published August 8th. And that's in the Midnight Cry, or I think it's written August 8th and it's published in the Midnight Cry August 22nd. And then there is the True Midnight Cry. The True Midnight Cry is published August 22nd and October 4th. Now that is a separate periodical, so it's not an article in the Midnight Cry or an article in the Signs of Times. And then there's in the Midnight Cry magazine, September 6th, an article called Prophetic Chronology. And that's it's written September 6th. It's published in the Midnight Cry September 19th, 1844. So we will look at these letters a little bit. I know we've looked at them before, but it definitely never hurts to go over some of this again, especially as we're going through these decrees and understanding the connections between these decrees and Samuel Snow's letters. So 457 and 515. So the 515, the second decree, has a connection in Samuel Snow's letters. Now the first decree does not particularly have a connection. That is, and I know we've looked at this before, so we can say, well, in the second decree, you're going to have the completion of the temple. It's going to be dedicated on the third day of the 12th month, or at least it's completed on the third day of the 12th month. And that is connected to Samuel Snow's, the publication of his first letter, right? So we have that there. We have the Pentecost connection. We have the fifth day of the fourth in the second decree, right? Or the third decree. We have the 54 days and the 54 days representing the fifth day of the fourth month, and the 107 days representing the 10th day of the seventh month, which is a chiasm in Millerite history, with Boston, July 21st, as the center of that chiasm. Right? So you got all these different chiasms in Millerite history and in 457. Okay, so let's go to the text itself to discuss how Snow gets it wrong but gets it right. So in the one that's published in the Midnight Cry, February 22nd, written February 16th, we looked at this a little bit, where he talks about the 6,000 years. And in that 6,000 years, he's going to, I'm constrained to believe that this period will comprise 6,000 full years. And from all I have as yet been able to discover in the chronology of the world, these years will be complete in the autumn of 1844. Now, he's making an argument dealing with that since the world was created in the autumn, with not a lot of evidence of that, but sort of conjecture and people having this opinion. But that's why he's going to put the autumn of 1844. And that's why he talks about full years, because originally he had the autumn of 1843 based on Miller's May 3rd letter, and where he talks about typology in the fall, and that they would expect maybe that fall in 1843, Christ could return in connection with the Day of Atonement. So Samuel Snow is going to pick up that idea and carry it over into 1844. Now, he's making mistakes regarding how this works. Now, if you think about this too, this is another thing that we need to pay attention to. Samuel Snow is not the only one saying this, but they understand that there is no 0 year. So this is not something that happened after the first disappointment. So almost every Adventist, me included in the past, believed that they didn't notice the mistake in their calculation until after the first disappointment. That is, they have the first disappointment, Jesus doesn't come, then they recognize there was no 0 year, and so they just extended. And that's not how it happened at all. So they already had understood in 1843 that there was no 0 year. So their disappointment, if you wanted to be sort of technically correct, it has nothing to do with there being no 0 year. Also, the fullness of the year. So there was this argument, position within the movement talking about the fullness of the year. And you can see they talk about full years here. He's going to say, so he talks about this 20 full years. So we go back down here. The 7 times of Moses in Leviticus 26 amount to 20 full years. They began with the breaking of the power of Judah at the captivity of Manasseh, BC 677. And this is the time that has always been given as the date of their commencement. Now, remember, we had talked about Miller using the breaking of Ephraim, right? Now, here he's going to talk about Judah, right? So he's got some differences already with Miller's understanding of the 25-20. So the captivity of Manasseh in BC 677, this is the time that has always been given as the date of their commencement, but there has been an error in supposing them to terminate in 1843, as I shall show. Had they begun on the 1st of January, BC 677, so he's going to use the January date, they would have ended January 1st, AD 1844. Now, they would have not ended before January 1st, 1844. Now, so what he's trying to say is you need full years. If you added 677 plus 1844, you'd get 25-21. So he's just showing you that there is no 0 year. Or had they begun on the first day of the Jewish year, 677, they could not end before the first day of the Jewish year in 1844. So now he's going to use the biblical date. So they would have to, if they began on that time, right? But then he says, for it is evident it requires 677 and 1843 entire years to make up the full period of 25-20. But at any point within BC 677, is only the 677th year before Christ. Reckoning back from the Christian era, we do not obtain 677 full years till we arrive at the extreme point, that is, the first day of BC 677. So also reckoning forward from the commencement of the Christian era, we do not obtain 1843 full years till we arrive at the extreme point, that is, the end of the AD 1843. Or the first day of AD 44. If then, AD 1844, if then the captivity of Manasseh did not occur as early as the first day of the Jewish year BC 677, then the 25-20 years cannot terminate until after the expiration of the present Jewish year. So he's just making an argument that if the captivity of Manasseh happened in the spring, then the 25-20 years would terminate in the spring. Now, is this argument that he's using for full years for the 25-20, is this sound? Does the 25-20 need to be 25-20 full years? Is this a requirement, I guess? Because we don't know when Manasseh was taken captive. Anyway, he's dealing with these full years. So think about that. We'll look at this a bit further. And it is evident that Manasseh was not taken in the early part of the year from the fact that Esarhaddon and the Assyrians were employed in carrying away the 10 tribes out of their land and placing foreigners in their stead in the same year and before the invasion of Judah. Now, this claim of his is this sound. So he makes this argument. It's evident that Manasseh was not taken in the early part of the year because Esarhaddon was employed in carrying away the 10 tribes out of their land and placing foreigners in their stead in the same year. Is that true? Anybody? Nobody knows?
Would you repeat your question, please?
Okay. So Samuel Snow says, it is evident that Manasseh was not taken in the early part of the year from the fact that Esarhaddon and the Assyrians were employed in carrying away the 10 tribes out of their land and placing foreigners in their stead in the same year and before the invasion of Judah. Is there any truthfulness to this statement that he makes?
Well, if we choose to accept it at face value, we would have to think that 677 is a problem as far as chronology is concerned.
What do you mean?
Well, what is he saying here? He's saying that Esarhaddon is otherwise occupied rather than taking Manasseh captive.
So we know the captains of the king of Assyria, which Esarhaddon's the king of Assyria in 677. Right. He takes Manasseh captive. But he's saying that that Esarhaddon and the Assyrians were carrying away the 10 tribes out of their land in 677. Is that true?
We could choose to accept that.
No, it's not true.
Okay.
He's going to put people in the land, but he's not removing them. There is right. Esarhaddon does not have a cap. Northern Israel was already conquered by Sargon II. They already had been transported to the other countries. So the Babylonian or Assyrian captivity has already begun. And we're going to get the Babylonian captivity much later on, right? Now, so Northern Israel is dealing with an Assyrian captivity, but it doesn't happen under Esarhaddon. It's simply that Esarhaddon is going to place people in the land, but that's not really connected to Manasseh's captivity, right? So it doesn't tell us when Manasseh is taken captive. Plus, there is not an invasion of Judah in 677. So when Manasseh is carried away, this isn't an invasion. It's going to be the captains of the king of Assyria. He's just going to be summoned or mustered. Adikima is the Akkadian word. So and plus 22 other kings, or maybe it's 22 altogether. I guess 22 kings, so 21 other kings, right? So they're going to be carried to Babylon. They're going to be shown the city of Babylon. They're going to be working as slaves. It has nothing to do with an invasion of Judah. So he makes this mistake, and then he's arguing that the 2520 must be 2520 full years from when Manasseh is carried captive and taken to Babylon, right? But I don't think that there's anything that would say that it has to be 2520 full years, because we have other periods of time and other prophecies that aren't necessarily exactly to the day. So we know the 10 tribes are carried away in 721. Esarhaddon, he's going to be quite a long time after. We're looking at 46, so I guess 44 years after they're carried away captive, that Manasseh is going to be taken captive. But back then, people didn't have as much information as we have. So this is a common opinion that people had regarding Manasseh's captivity and so forth. But it definitely doesn't work. Now then he's going to say, we find the history of this in 2 Kings 17:20-24. The prophecy concerning it we find in Isaiah 7:8. And we know that Isaiah 7:8 is actually addressing the captivity of Manasseh and Hoshea, which we have as 723 and 677. And the prophecy is dated, he says correctly, 742. So that from this date we count 65. It brings us to 677. In that year, in the fulfillment of the prediction of Hosea 5:5, Israel and Judah were both broken. So this Hosea 5:5 is rather interesting, because we don't usually use it. So you got the right verse here. Doesn't look like. I think he's got the wrong verse, but there is a verse in Hosea dealing with it. I don't know. Anyway, there's one where it talks about sort of, I guess here it's just going to say, the pride of Israel doth testify to his face. Therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity. Judah also shall fall with them. But I'm thinking of a different verse. So he's trying to apply this verse specifically there. I wouldn't, when he says Judah also shall fall with them, he's trying to place 677 and the captivity of Israel at the same time, right? So that would be a misuse of that verse. So he says Israel and Judah were both broken, but it doesn't say anything about them being. But as it must necessarily require considerable time to remove the 10 tribes and bring foreigners in their place, we cannot well date Manasseh's captivity earlier than the autumn of that year. Now, of course, there's also a illogical thing too, because why can't they be doing both at the same time? Why can't they be taking, northern Israel captive and also invading Judah and taking Manasseh captive at the beginning of the year? Right. So it's not really a very logical argument. So he just says, we must necessarily extend the period of the 25-20 years down to the autumn of 1844. And he's going to deal with the 2300 days, but it's the starting point of the 2300 days and the 70 weeks we need to pay attention to. So the 2300 days of Daniel 8 began with the 70 weeks, BC 457, but they did not begin with the first day of that year. It is true that Ezra began to go up from Babylon on the first day of the first month. So he does understand that first day of the first month a bit. But this was not in the year BC 457, but in the year BC 456. So he's going to have 456 BC as the seventh year of Artaxerxes. Now, pretty sure it's Purdue, however you say the guy's Purdue, whose chronology he's using. So the 456 date he has would actually be 457, so that would be, and then again we have much more information regarding Artaxerxes' reign, how it would be counted, how the Jews counted it. We have all kinds of archaeological records they would not have had in 1844. So his idea that the seventh year of Artaxerxes is 456 is not correct, because he has began, according to Dr. Hales, and now it's Dr. Hales. That's who he's using. No, Trudeau's another one. So yeah, it's Hales' chronology. Analysis of the chronology of 457 and ended in 456. It has been the practice of chronologers to count the years of the reign of monarchs by the year in which they began to reign, making that their first year. Is that true? No, right? So they would use accession year dating. He's talking about non-accession year dating. Or is it the other way around, how you say that? Yeah, non-accession year. So they don't have an accession year. So they just say he began to reign, that's his first year. Now, of course, that's not how it works. But anyway, the Jews are going to count the reign fall to fall for Artaxerxes. So it doesn't really matter about chronologists or how the Babylonians counted it. It's how the Jews counted that matter. Accordingly, the year BC 457, in which the seventh year of Artaxerxes began, is counted in his seventh year, as his seventh year. Now, it appears from the best light we can obtain on this point that he began his reign in autumn. This seventh year then must have commenced in the autumn of BC 457, as it was spring that Ezra left Babylon, and in the seventh year of the king. Now, we're going to know the Jews are going to count it autumn to autumn, but he didn't. And he's going to count his reign from the spring of 458 to the spring of 457. So we know that that doesn't fit. All right. So there's just things he doesn't get right. And if we're arguing that, Samuel Snow is somehow inspired, because this is the midnight cry and we have to take everything that he says, how does that relate to our position regarding light? So we could have a problem. That is, we can see that people misuse this idea. That is, they'll say, well, the Millerites got lots of things wrong, so they're not infallible, and so we can just come up with completely new ideas. So we know there's a foundation that's been laid, and so for some people, finding fault with Samuel Snow is attacking the foundation. But we have seen that when they get some things right, and the things that they get wrong are not the main point, but some of their arguments around their conclusions, right? So, for instance, when they think that the Karaites always begin the year 1 month later than the rabbinic Jews, as the reason why they're going to go to the fall of 1844 without understanding the biblical calendar. The fact that they get October 22nd right, even though they're using the wrong method, is significant. God is actually directing them, but they're not always getting all of the details right. But for some people, this is problematic, right? They say, oh, Samuel Snow wrote this. It was the Midnight Cry. We're rejecting the Midnight Cry if we reject any of his arguments. Yeah. So now it was the spring that Ezra left Babylon in the 7th year of the king, and must have been the spring of BC 456, as no other spring is embraced in the king's 7th year. Right. So he's going to be correct that it's fall to fall. The thing is, he has the wrong years, right? Because he's using Dr. Hale's chronology, and Dr. Hale's, when he says 457, it's what we call 458. When he says 456, it's what we call 457. So Snow doesn't know that. So he's going to date the 2300 days and the 70 weeks from the fall of 457, but he's going to be just that when the decree is issued, right? But it is not the point from which to date the 70 weeks. The decree to restore and build Jerusalem must have been issued from the king before this. Now, this is one of the big major mistakes. So he says, from Esther 2:16, we learn that she was made queen in the 10th month of the Jewish year and in the 7th year of the king. Now, this could not have been the year BC 456, for his 7th year expired before the 10th month of that year began. It must therefore have been BC 457. At that time, a great feast was made and a release of the provinces, which of course embraced the Jews, as they were the people of the queen. But this release could not have been made without a previous decree. So he is actually thinking that the story of Esther is the king is Artaxerxes. So why does he think it's Artaxerxes and not Xerxes? Why is he getting the story of Esther here mixed up with this story? People got Artaxerxes and Xerxes mixed up before. They have been conflated in the past. The Greeks conflated them. We see that in the apocryphal Esther, right? We see that they're going to use the name Artaxerxes instead of Ahasuerus, right? So there's this confusion that's existing regarding Xerxes and Xerxes. So he's making some honest mistakes, but he's still getting the right date. He just is connecting it to the history incorrectly. Okay. So then he says, now he's going to go into, so now he has BC 457. He says, from that time, according to Daniel 9:25, there were to be 69 weeks, 483 years to the appearing of the Messiah. It has been thought that by many this period was fulfilled in AD 26, but this is a mistake. It requires 457 and 26 entire years to make 483, right? So we have to, we add them together, we get 483, but they have to be entire years. But as we have seen, as part of BC 457 must be left out of the reckoning, the time must therefore be made up by the addition of a part of AD 27 and the 15th year of Tiberius, in which John began his ministry, commenced in AD 26 and corresponds in part to AD 26 and part of 27. In the latter part then of AD 26, or in the former part of AD 27, John began his ministry. But it was after John was imprisoned that Jesus came into Galilee, saying, the time is fulfilled. This must have been, I think, in the autumn of AD 27. It is certain that it was after the Passover, as we may learn by comparing John 2:23 and 3:22-24 and 4:43 with Mark 1:14 and 15. If then the 69 weeks ended in the autumn of AD 27, then may we expect the 2300 days to end? When may we expect the 2300 days to end? The answer is plain. Deduct 483 from 2300, and the remainder is 1817. So many years remained to be fulfilled in the autumn of AD 27. And add to that date these 1817 years, and it brings us to the autumn of AD 1844. So is he correct about how John's ministry relates to this? So he's going to have in the autumn of 27 AD that he says the time is fulfilled. Now that's going to be in the spring, right? In whichever verse that is, John. So he has these different verses that we can compare. But we understand that it's actually his baptism when the 70 weeks begin, not when he begins his ministry in Galilee, because that's in the spring. Now he knows it's after the Passover, which it is, but it's right after the Passover. It's still in the spring. Okay, and then, of course, the 1290 and the 1335 days, those aren't really being affected. But he just says the latter, he says here, as respects the 1290 and the 1335 days of Daniel 12, they must, of course, begin together, the latter ending with the 2300 days in 1844. As there is a difference of only 45 years between the two periods, the 1290 days could not have ended in February 1798, as 46 years have passed since that time. The periods must have begun in AD 509, and the 1290 days terminated in 1799, with the commencement of Napoleon's career of blood and conquest, 1335 days ending in the autumn of 1844. But does he get this correct? Would any of us take this position regarding the 1290 and the 1335? No, right? So he's going to have the 1290 terminating in 1799 and the 1335 terminating in 1844. Now this is his initial writing, so we can see there's problems here that he fixes in the True Midnight Cry publication. So a person could say, well, yeah, here, he made all these mistakes. Now some of them are fixed, but some of them are still carried over. Now here, this is just a note when they republish these in the Signs of the Times. And we can see that there was a reluctance for them to publish his stuff because it was full of mistakes. But on April 3rd, Passover that the Jews and the Karaites kept, is when they're going to republish this. So it's going to be published February 22nd, republished April 3rd. And the fact that it's connected to the Passover also connects us to the 12th day of the third month. That is, when we go back here, go to Ezra. So we already noted that they're going to dedicate the temple, right? It's finished on the third day of the month, Adar, the 6th year of the reign of Darius. And then the children of the captivity kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. So we're going to see that they then keep the Passover, and that's going to be 40 days later. So we see that there is this publication on the 12th day of March, right? But the third day of the 12th month. And then, of course, we're going to have a Passover afterwards. So that happens in 1844 as well with Samuel Snow's letters. So to me, that's an extremely important point when we're dealing with Snow's letters here, in that we see these connections to the second decree with the 12th of the third day of the 12th month, right? Which is March 12th in 515. And then the Passover going to be following later. Now, so that's going to be the 14th day of the first month. It's going to be April 21st in Ezra 6:19. Right? So that's this date here. But you can see that's going to line up with the publication on April 3rd of Samuel Snow's letter. So you got these publication, this lines up, and the Passover lines up. So we start to find a structure here in Samuel Snow's letters relating to these decrees, the second decree, and then also, of course, the third decree. I don't have like a specific date dealing with like the 24th day of the first month, or April 23rd in any of these. So that one doesn't happen with the first decree, or even the second day of the second month, or anything that I've looked at. Maybe there's something there that I didn't notice, we could maybe argue that there's the setting up of the altar, the first day of the seventh month in that first decree. So they're going to have the decree and then 154 days later. So I guess what we have there is the 154 days. That's 2 months and 16 days plus 2 months and 16 days equals 154 days, 153rd, depending where you are within a calendar. So maybe that's another way that we could connect the first decree, just the 154 days. But the first day of the seventh month in Millerite history is when they believe that probation had closed. So they're not going to be, preaching to anybody after the first day of this, which is October 13th in 1844. They've done their work, right? They're just waiting for Christ to return on October 22nd. Okay. I know that's a lot of information, but you can see here that when we go back to the scriptures and we go to these stories, that they're connecting us to this history. So we have the Passover, and then we have Ezra chapter 7. So, and we will look at the true midnight cry as well. But just before we get there, let's look at Ezra 7. So we have the decree of Artaxerxes. We don't need to read some of this earlier stuff here. It says, this Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a ready scribe in the law of Moses, which the Lord God of Israel had given. And the king granted him all his requests according to the hand of the Lord his God upon him. Right? So here it just says the Ezra, the son of Sarai, it just mentions this Ezra, and then it just says he's going to grant him his request. Now, does it say anything about what his request is in Ezra 7? So in Ezra chapter 6, this is dealing with the Passover, right? This is dealing with 515 BC. And then we jump right away to, 457 BC, right? So it just lists all these people's names. And then it says this Ezra that they mentioned in verse 1 went up from Babylon, and he was a ready scribe in the law of Moses. And the king granted him all his requests according to the hand of his Lord God upon him. And then it says, and there went up some of the children of Israel and of the priests and the Levites and the singers and the porters and the Nethinim into Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes the king. So we know they're going to travel in the 7th year, and Artaxerxes counts his reign spring to spring, but we know that this must be counted fall to fall. And he came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. So this 7th year must go from, at least it covers the 5th month that he comes to Jerusalem. And then it says, for upon the first day of the 1st month began he to go up from Babylon. And on the first day of the 5th month came he to Jerusalem according to the good hand of his God upon him. So this doesn't help us know whether he's counting spring to spring or fall to fall. Like if it said, he began it was in the 7th year on the 10th day or the 10th month, and then, then the 5th month and still in the 7th year, then we would clearly have that it's fall to fall that he's counting. But here we can't tell that particularly because it's only going to go far back as the first day of the 1st month. And of course, that is in the spring. So we know this journey we understand this, that they leave them in the spring. It's going to be April 26th, 457 BC, that they're going to leave Babylon. Now, of course, they're going to meet at the river Ahava. So this is, he's leaving. He began to go up from Babylon, and began he to go up on the first day of the 5th month. He's going to come to Jerusalem. On the first day of the 1st month he leaves, first day of the 5th month he arrives. For Ezra prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord, to do it, and to teach Israel statutes and judgments. Now this is the copy of the letter that the king Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even a scribe of the words of the commandments of the Lord, and of his statutes to Israel. Now, this is going to be in Aramaic, right? So this here in chapter 7, remember we had switched back to Hebrew. We were in Aramaic with the 2nd decree. and then we switch back to Hebrew, and now we're going to move in this verse back to Aramaic, right? Okay, so Artaxerxes, king of kings, unto Ezra the priest, a scribe of the law of God of heaven, perfect peace, and at such a time I make a decree that all they of the people of Israel and of his priests and Levites in my realm, which are minded of their free will, their own free will, to go up to Jerusalem, go with thee. For as much as thou art sent of the king and of his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem according to the law of thy God, which is in thine hand, and to carry silver and gold, which the king and his counselors have freely offered unto the God of Israel, whose habitation is in Jerusalem. So again, it refers back to that Ezra had made this request, but it doesn't really go into details about it. And all the silver and gold that thou canst find in all the province of Babylon, with the free will offering of the people and of the priests, offered willingly for the house of their God, which is in Jerusalem, that thou mayest buy speedily with this money bullocks and rams, lambs, and their meat offerings and their drink offerings, and offer them upon the altar of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. So similar to Darius's decree. And whatsoever shall seem good to thee and to the brethren, to do with the rest of the silver and the gold, that do after the will of your God. The vessels also that are given thee for the service of the house of thy God, those deliver thou before the God of Jerusalem. And whatsoever more shall be needful for the house of thy God, which thou shalt have occasion to bestow it out of the king's treasure house. And I, even I, Artaxerxes the king, do make a decree to all the treasurers which are beyond the river, that whatsoever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, shall require of you, it be done speedily. Unto 100 talents of silver, and to 100 measures of wheat, and to 100 baths of wine, and to 100 baths of oil, and salt without prescribing how much. Whatsoever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be diligently done for the house of the God of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his sons? So what is this a reference to? Why is he mentioned this? Darius did the same thing. So with the Persians, they seem that they're respecting the religions of the different nationalities. And so they have some understanding about the Jews, even though it's not like he's buying into the Jewish religion, that he's accepting it. He just is respecting it. Okay. Also, we certify you that touching any of the priests, Levites, singers, porters, Nethinims, or ministers of this house of God, it shall not be lawful to impose toll, tribute, or custom upon them. And thou, Ezra, after the wisdom of thy God that is in thine hand, set magistrates and judges. So this is really the body of the decree. So you've got magistrates, judges, which may judge all the people that is beyond the river, all such as know the laws of thy God, and teach ye them that know them not. And whosoever will not do the law of thy God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily upon him, whether it be unto death, or to banishment, or to confiscation of goods, or to imprisonment. So there are 4 things, right, which we have noted in the past: the death penalty, exile, confiscation of goods, or prison, right? Those 4 things are being given, that is the authority of the Jews to enforce their own laws within the Persian realm. Blessed be the Lord God of our fathers, which hath put such a thing as this in the king's heart, to beautify the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem, right? And hath extended mercy unto me before the king and his counselors. So this is going to be Ezra talking. And before all the king's mighty princes, and I was strengthened as the hand of the Lord my God was upon me. I gathered together out of Israel chief men to go up with me. So they have this decree that's issued. It doesn't say exactly when it's issued. We just know that under this decree, he's going to leave on the first day of the first month. So the decree has to be issued prior to that. I don't think the decree would have been issued in the fall, right? And then, he's going to go like 6 months later. I would think it's going to be a little bit of time before. But we saw under the decree of Cyrus, it's going to be issued in the spring, and they're going to leave pretty soon afterwards. So So I would think it wouldn't have been too long from when the decree is given to when they leave on the first day of the first month. Okay. Now, Ellen White talks about, so we now have Artaxerxes' decree. So let's just go back here and address this again. So we know in verse 14, it says that they builded and finished it, that is the house of God, according to the commandment of the God of Israel, according to the commandment of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. We know the temple's finished under Darius's decree. And again, we had noted that Artaxerxes' decree addresses giving some of these things to the temple, but it's not completed under his decree. But there's a reason here that Ellen White says originating, affirming, and completing the specifications of the prophecy. That is the prophecy of Daniel chapter 9. Now, one of the things that I addressed when I started looking at these prophetic periods, the start of it, this journey, is that there is the going forth of the commandment. Let me see here. Well, better drawing. I'll just look through these. Okay, well, this diagram here, I'll show you this one. 1844. I bet where's the 457 now? I was just looking at. Here it is. Okay, so in 457, he leaves on the first day of the first month, right? And we're going to see that as we look at chapter 8. They get to the river Ahava. They have to send back for some Levites. So he's got priests with him, no Levites. They're going to have a fast there, a 3-day fast, while they're at the river Ahava, and then they're going to leave on the 12th day of the first month. And then we have them arriving on the first day of the fifth month, and then they wait 3 days and then bring the gold and silver to the temple on the 4th day of the fifth month. So that being 107 days, and an inclusive count of 54 days. That is, simply we know from the 16th day of the first month to Pentecost is 49 days, but it's called the 50th day, right? If you count inclusively. So from the 16th day of the first month to the 6th day of the third month, that's the 50th day. If you count back, the 15th would be 51 days, the 14th would be 52, the 13th would be 53, and when you go back to the 12th day, it's going to be 54. So that's an inclusive count. But from the 6th day of the third month to the first day of the fifth month is 54 cardinal days. You wouldn't start with a 1, you're going to have a 0 in there, right? So you're not going to count the 6th day of the third month twice. And then when you count from the span from the center there, you got that span, 107 days. So the 2 periods of 54 days add up to 107 days. Right? It could be confusing, but it's depending on how you're counting. So it's 107 days, just the cardinal count, an inclusive count. Inclusive would be 108 days. And we know in Millerite history, of course, the 5th day of the 4th month and the 10th day of the 7th month. And then you have the 3 days that they bring gold and silver, which gives us that chiasm in the first place. When we first looked at the chiasm, it wasn't actually with the Pentecost chiasm. The first time we looked at it was with the Day of Atonement chiasm. That is, we were trying to figure out what Ezra was doing in that time, setting up this administration, the magistrates and judges, right? And it takes some time. He gets there on the first day of the fifth month, but at some point he's going to refer to these laws, which they have power to do, which we're going to look at in chapter 9, chapter 10 of Ezra. And then you have the 20th day of the 9th month, and there's going to be 3 days that they get to go to Jerusalem to a call to repentance. So that was the first 2 periods of 3 days. And then, so we looked at the center, that was the 10th day of the 7th month. And then later I looked at, there's two other periods of 3 days. What's the center of that? That it happened to be the 6th day of the third month, that it was a period of 107 days, that it's 2 periods of 54 days. Seemed obvious that, this was relating to 1844 and the midnight and the Day of Atonement. And then, of course, we have the Day of Atonement as the center of the other chiasm. Now, I have there 69 days. That's the actual count. You could just count 70 days and 70 days. You're still going to get 10th day of the 7th month as the center. That is, if you didn't know there was 30 and 29 days in these months, you would just count, first day of the 5th month. That'd be 70 days to the first day, or the 10th day of the 7th month. And then from the 10th day of the 7th month, it'd be 70 days to the 20th day of the 9th month. In this case, we're counting actual days, so it's 69 and 69. So there's a 30-day month, a 29-day month. Tishri's 30, Heshvan's 29, Kislev's 30. Right? So that's how it works. Okay? And then we have that period of time which we studied into dealing with the divorcement, the 88 days from the first day of the 10th month to the first day of the first month. We've got all of these spans of time. I didn't put our dates in there. I just put the biblical dates. Okay. So let's see what we get done in the next 15 minutes. Any questions about any of that first, I guess? No, it's review, so you guys probably understand it pretty well. So in chapter 8, they're going to deal with people who went with him. And then it says, and I gathered them together to the river that runneth to Ahava, and there abode we in tents 3 days. And I viewed the people and the priests and found there was none of the sons of Levi. So the way that he tells the story is he sort of summarizes, we're there for 3 days, but he's going to give more detail about it. So then sent I for Eliezer, for Ariel, for Shemaiah, for Elnathan, for John, right, these different people. And I sent with them with commandment unto Iddo, the chief of the place of Casaphia. And I told them that what they should say unto Iddo and to his brethren, the Nethinim, at the place Casaphia, that they should bring unto us ministers for the house of our God. And by the good hand of our God upon us, they brought us a man of understanding of the sons of Mali, the son of Levi, the son of Israel, and Sherebiah and his sons and his brethren, 18. Okay, so it's going to say these people that are going to be brought, and of the Nethinims, whom David, the princes had appointed for service of the Levites, 220 Nethinim. Yep. Somebody said something. Okay. Somebody have a comment? So I know I'm kind of rushing through this a little bit, but the way they tell the story is, sort of repeat and enlarge. Now we know the 220 Nethinim we use as a symbol. 220 is restoration. It's also the period of years from 677 to 457. And in 22 is also a symbol of restoration. So we have lots of those symbols in Scripture. So then he says, then I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our God, to seek of him a right way for us and for our little ones and for all our substance. So he is left on the first day of the first month. He's going to get to the river Ahava. He's going to be there for 3 days. So when he says he's going to proclaim a fast there, that fast is the 3-day fast. He's going to proclaim that at the beginning, right? That says, then I proclaimed a fast, but that then is not really there, right? It's just, it's in our English. But the idea is that this would have happened when they first arrived and they sent for the Levites. They're going to have a fast. For I'm ashamed to require of the king a band of soldiers and horsemen to help us against the enemy in the way, because we had spoken unto the king, saying, the hand of our God is upon all them for good that seek him, but his power and his wrath is against all of them that forsake him. So he's making this prayer for God to protect them, because he already made that claim, and he doesn't want to, have the king, have an escort, because God's going to protect them. So we fasted and besought our God for this, and he was entreated of us. Now, this is an important point just from a spiritual point of view. Now, you could say, well, he already knew that God's going to take care of him. Why does he need to fast and pray for this protection if he already believes that God's going to protect him? Why do we pray? God already knows everything.
Because we need to submit to him, not just to our will, but to his will.
Okay, right. So we pray to God not just for him to hear us, but for us to hear God. And it is an act of submission, of trusting God when we fast and pray. We're not trying to change God's mind, right? We're not pagans, but we are trying to align ourselves with God. And that helps us when things maybe go different than we expect. But often God, you know, brings us through experiences which, if we had not prayed, and things had gone awry, uh, we would have less confidence that God is leading and guiding. So by prayer, we align ourselves with God. So part of the thing of the story is he's not telling things in chronological order. That's one of the things that we need to be aware of. He's telling you what happened at the river Ahava, but not necessarily in the order it occurred. I separated 12 of the chief of the priests, Sherebiah, Hashabiah, and 10 of the brethren with them, and weighed unto them the silver and the gold and the vessels, even the offering of the house of our God, which the king and his counselors and his lords and all Israel there present had offered. They even weighed unto their hand 650 talents of silver, and silver vessels, and 100 talents, and of gold 100 talents, and 20 basins of gold, and 1,000 drams, and 2 vessels of fine copper, precious as gold. And I said unto them, Ye are holy unto the Lord. The vessels are holy also, and the silver and the gold are a freewill offering unto the Lord God of your fathers. Watch ye and keep them until ye weigh them before the chief of the priests and of the Levites and the chief of the fathers of Israel at Jerusalem in the chambers of the house of the Lord. So took the priests and the Levites the weight of the silver and the gold and the vessels to bring them to Jerusalem unto the house of our God. Then we departed from the river Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go unto Jerusalem, and the hand of our God was upon us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy, and of as such as lay in wait by the way. Now, so exactly when they got the gold and silver, when it was distributed, we could argue maybe it happens just before they depart. Could have happened any time during that 3 days, but still, we know that when they get to Jerusalem, it says in verse 32, we came to Jerusalem and abode there 3 days. And on the 4th day was the silver and the gold of the vessels weighed in the house of our God by the hand of Meremoth, the son of Uriah the priest, and with him was Eliezer. Now, here, we know that they arrived on the 1st day of the 5th month. As far as understanding this chronology, so I'm going to have to put this in here. So let's look at this. And, we're going to come back to some of this on Sunday. But right now I got the dates here in 515 and, under the first decree and also the building of the temple. But now we're going to go to 457. So in 457, we're going to have April 26th. That's going to be the first day of the first month. If we look at the Babylonian calendar, it's going to be the first day of the second month. Adaru is the second month. Now, Grace Amadon, she's going to just use the Babylonian calendar. So why are we not here using the Babylonian calendar? Why are we using the biblical calendar? We know in Ezra, he's going to use Babylonian months and so forth. So one is, it's not going to tell you the name of the month, right? Now, of course, in Ezekiel, he doesn't name the months either. But Ezra sometimes does name the months. We saw Haggai and Zechariah naming the months. Okay. But here we're not going to have the months named by Ezra. But so we have to say, is it this month? So if it was if the first month started on, this is Adar, the second Adar, it would have been March 27th. Now, here we got March 22nd is going to be, so why are we adding an extra month? Why are we giving a leap month here? So they would go at sunset the day before, March 21st, right? And is it after the spring equinox? It's pretty close, isn't it? Right. So you could say, well, in 457, because March 21st, it's the spring equinox, and on the Gregorian calendar. So we see the Gregorian calendar. We could say it's the 20th, right? So I've looked at this in detail, exactly when the spring equinox would have occurred. So here, it's close. The Babylonian calendar in this period, I don't think we have documents that can tell us exactly how they did this calendar in that year, the Babylonians. But we're going to use the biblical example. So when we look at this, we'll see that on the 29th of Adar, when they go out, it has to be after the spring equinox. And I'm arguing that it's not yet after the spring equinox. The spring equinox would be the day following. So they're going to have to add the extra month. And we could look at that in more detail. We just don't have that much time right now. So we take the position that it's April 26th, 457. That's the first day of the first month. Okay. So I'm going to save that date. And then they're going to have another week and a day. So we'll say Nisan 9. Right? I'm going to save that. They're going to get to the river Ahava. And then there's going to be 3 days, and they're going to leave the river Ahava. Now, it's not quite 100% clear, because we can look at this. It's parts of days. So obviously, if they're, they get there on the 9th, they'd probably get there in the evening. They're probably leaving in the morning on the 12th. So, how exactly you count that? There's different ways of counting when they say they were there for 3 days. But they tell us when they leave. So we know that specifically. Exactly when they get there, how that works out, we don't know. So when we look at this here, we can see they're going to leave. I put in these different 457, April 26th. And then we got May 4th, they get at the river Ahava, and then May 7th, they're going to leave. Okay. I have to get rid of some of these dates because this only saves so many dates. Let's see that. This date. These are just the dates from Solomon's. And then we're going to have Pentecost, right? So we're going to have to count from there. Cardinal count would be 53 days. So when we do that, we get to the 6th day of the 3rd month, Pentecost. That would be June 29th, 457 on the Julian calendar. And then we're going to count 54 days. And that's going to bring us to the 1st day of the 5th month. Okay. So I'm going to put the biblical dates here. You can see them here on the left side. So we can see these different spans of time. From the 1st day of the 1st month, you can see the 8 days. So it's going to be the 12th day. And then you got 56 days, 110 days. There's your 107, 11, 18 days. Okay, so we got these different spans of time. And then we're going to have, it says the 4th day. Now, the 4th day, I take it as the 4th day of the 5th month, which is also the 4th day that they're going to bring the gold and silver. So they get there on the 1st day of the 5th month. And what I wanted to show here, I guess I should go back. So when they get there, it's going to be a Thursday, right? And it's interesting too, it's August 22nd, 1st day of the 5th month in that year. So that lines up with, like, normally we look at August 15th, right, in Millerite history. That's when the Midnight Cry is given, but we can also see this August 22nd date as a symbol. It lines up with the publication of the true Midnight Cry. So that's a Thursday. So if it was the 3rd, they would have brought the gold and silver on the Saturday. So we're arguing that when it says the fourth day, they mean the fourth day of the fifth month, right? You see that there? So it's on a Sunday that they're going to bring the gold and silver. And that makes sense. They're not going to bring it on the Sabbath. So they're going to bring it on the first day of the week. And that date we can save in there as well. Okay. So I think that's as many as we can say. I can't remember how many we should say. Okay, so we're going to come back to this on Sunday, but you can see that we have a lot of dates back to the Julian Gregorian there. So we got all these symbols that we can look at. So, any final thoughts before we close with prayer?
Yeah, you mentioned the midpoints being Pentecost, and then the Day of Atonement.
Yeah.
And then between the Day of Atonement and the 20th day of the 9th month, you have the 15th day of the 8th month.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the first day of the 5th month to the Day of Atonement is the 5th day of the 6th month, which we find in Ezekiel chapter 8.
Yeah. So the 5th day is his second vision.
Yes. And then on the first day of the first day of the first month to the 20th day of the 9th month, we have the 10th day of the 5th month, which is the day the temple was destroyed.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, you should prepare a chart with those different chiasms. I don't think I have it.
Yeah, okay, I'll send that to you.
The PowerPoint, so I can just copy and paste it into my charts.
Yeah, I done a PowerPoint on that, on all the midpoints.
Yeah, so it's I mean, there's all kinds of structures in 457 that connect us to these other symbolic dates, these midpoints.
Yeah. So the midpoint between the 12th day of the first month and the first day of the 10th month, when the examination of the marriages begin. So that midpoint is the 21st day of the 5th month, which is the 11th of September in 457 BC.
Okay.
And then I had noted that between 9/11, 2001 and 457 is 2,457 years, and the 2,457th prime number is 21911. So you have there without the placeholders. If you put them in, you got 2001 911.
Okay, put that together. We can look at that on Sunday.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, if you can, appreciate it. So there's a bunch of things, that when we start looking at these structural chiasms that continue pointing to these significant dates, and that's not very likely because it's structural, right? It's not just some mere coincidence, a stray coincidence that we notice, right? Okay, well, thanks for that. So let's close with prayer. Now, dear Father in heaven, thank you again for this past week and for all of your blessings. And we ask that you can continue to be with us in our personal studies. Pray for the studies tomorrow evening and for Sabbath, which we still have to figure out. And bring us together again to study these things is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.